Yeah.
The question to you, Eric. You say you're interested in getting into politics. What level of like? Because I don't know how it would work in America, but like here where I am, there's
Hmm.
town mayors, then there's department. Uh, then they go to Paris to discuss certain things, and then there's the level up from that, the region. Like, so, what sort of like you say you work in special ed now? Are you talking about getting involved in leadership at in the school board or leadership in your
I
town?
literally just started thinking about it, but yeah, I've thought about that. I mean, ideally, I'd like to. I mean, there's like town selectmen. Usually, it's like probably the lowest rung thing that you could run for. But then I'm starting to think, I'm like, I don't know. I want to go in where I can make the best difference. So I kind of like to probably jump in as high as I legally could with the lack of experience I have. Um, Willing to learn, willing to put in the effort. To be honest with you, I hate public speaking. It's not something I would want to do, but I don't know. I just it's just somebody needs to just get people to work together, and I don't see why it's such a hard thing to do.
There were other candidates that you guys had running. What did you guys think of them? Like Andrew Yang, and then, I mean, I guess Bernie Sanders dropped out, but
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I really liked Andrew Yang.
yeah.
I didn't
He
agree
seemed
with him a
like
lot.
he seemed a reasonable person, Andrew Yang. Like when
Exactly. So like I think that's what we need most.
Hmm.
yeah.
Maybe we don't need someone that we completely agree with, but we need someone
Hmm.
who's genuine, that's willing to
Exactly.
hear the other side
Look
and
at
then change when
look
needed.
at both sides.
Right.
Yeah, so like
Exactly.
the way I see it, like this election we had Andrew Yang and Bernie Sanders.
Hmm.
Last election we had Bernie Sanders. What was
Yeah.
interesting, the election before that, I think it was with Obama. The conservatives had Ron Paul. And this
Hmm.
was a really old guy, conservative, but he got a lot of momentum because he was like the conservative version of Bernie Sanders. He was
Hmm.
Yeah.
talking about different issues, but he was ridiculously consistent over decades, and everyone thought of him as a good guy.
Right.
He
Yeah.
was the libertarian, wasn't he, Ron Paul? Yeah.
Correct. Yeah,
Yep.
that's how I think libertarianism got more popular here in America as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. And also, like, I'm not trying to be ageist, but like when you have like 70-year-olds running
Right.
in politics, like sometimes I think like how much of an influence they can make, because a lot of what they know is just
Hmm.
like there's only so much they could do to keep up with all the changes that have been showing up over like the last decades and stuff.
Yeah, like
And
how, like when Google or
like,
Facebook goes to our Congress and they're like,
yeah,
how does Google work? Can it follow
exactly.
me?
The
I
internet
know, yeah,
is
like
huge.
I actually saw part of the like court hearings when it was like what happened? Okay. When it was like the Republican government like speaking with Mark Zuckerberg, and I don't know, there was like this whole like 3 hour like long or like 48-hour video on YouTube. And I watched parts of it, and like these old people didn't understand a thing, and like it makes it so much easier for like younger people to manipulate them.
Yeah.
So
That is true.
um so yeah, like I don't know how to feel about like I don't know what Joe Biden can do, as like who knows how long he's gonna live to like
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then like so
another.
with your question, like, do we think democracy works? I've heard that before, but like
Mhm.
in what way do you mean that? So like I think in one way it works better than it doesn't work. There is a
Yeah.
problem with like money and corruption. It's like
Hmm.
how does it really help the common person?
Exactly. And
And
I think
then
that's another problem in US, where it's what probably is part of like the whole uh, polarizedness or whatever. But how like every industry in US is pretty monopolized. Like it's only like a few companies in each industry that like owns most of the wealth, so they have way more like power and influence in like telling the government what they want, and then like the government will just cater to like what these big companies agendas are instead
Yeah.
of
Well, it's funny. I think that the thing that people don't understand in America is that the people really do have a lot more power than they think they do. And I think that the media and the government likes to try to make everybody think that they don't. Because here's the
Yeah.
thing, like boycotting, like for example, like I do lean conservative myself, but when the Occupy Wall Street event happened, I don't know if you guys remember that.
Yeah, it's great.
Now,
Yeah.
now
And it actually did bring quite a bit of change, didn't it?
Hmm.
Yeah.
But my thing is they could have done so much more if it didn't alienate conservatives. I think that a lot of the stuff that Occupy Wall Street was fighting for were stuff that conservatives would get on board too. But the problem is that they attacked the conservatives.
I
which
know.
immediately puts the conservatives on the defense, and then it becomes polarized.
I
It's
think
like
that's the problem. Like a lot of, a lot of the concerns that like people who vote like or like left-wing leaning and right-wing leaning people have are very common. Like they all struggle with common issues, and
right.
if they could unite and then attack the government, you guys would accomplish so much more than
Right.
just being like one on one.
Yeah, I mean that's like the magic
Yeah.
answer. Who's gonna figure out how to do that?
I think the government, I think these parties would be terrified if you could come along and
Yeah.
say, look, okay, we've got differences, but let's focus on what we've got in common.
Exactly.
Right.
I think
That would change
like
things.
I think it would scare like political leaders because then they would feel more threatened by the people, and then
Right.
they would feel less powerful.
Yeah,
you've
and this
seen
is where it's like I got to give like the conservatives and Trump a valid point. Like
Yeah.
you can say maybe a lot of bad things about Trump, but we know 100% for sure the DNC, our Democratic committee, they screwed over Bernie, and like
Oh yeah.
that's 100% undeniable. So it's like,
It was also very visual too. So it was like, that whole crooked Hillary. It was like, yeah, maybe they didn't break a rule or a law technically, but Americans could really see that it wasn't fair how they treated him, and but just visually it looked so bad that Clinton, the one with the money, the one with the
yeah,
backing, just sort of like stood on this guy that people were actually, a lot of people really did support. And yeah, no, that visually that didn't work. That didn't work out.
yeah. So like one example is that during one of the debates, the moderator actually gave Hillary Clinton the questions ahead of time to help her prepare and everything. And then the moderator tried defending herself, but that was just like one clear example. And this goes to Rebecca. Maybe Bernie was more so for the people, and when that tries to gain a foothold in politics, they're like, nah, no, we're not gonna let you in.
Yep. I agree with that.
But it always starts off small.
Yeah. It is.
So, Rebecca, is there any questions that come to your mind? I mean, like just speaking really broadly, like with regard to Peterson or politics or anything.
No, I mean I guess like another thing I was thinking of after like watching the elections and stuff was what you guys also thought of like social media and like tech companies like Facebook, and how like the government is trying to sue Facebook now, and
Like with like free speech and stuff.
censorship and other stuff. Yeah, and like also they're trying to break up all of the big tech companies or whatever, like Facebook, Google, Amazon.
Sounds about right.
Yeah.
Let's not fix it. Let's break it up. Let's just get rid of it.
It's always like a temporary solution.
Yeah.
The one thing that comes to my mind, like breaking up, if you like the Jim Crow laws, I believe they are in America, where they broke up the oil companies to make to make multiple oil companies so that they would compete and keep the price low in America. That works when you've got a defined market, but right now with the internet, you break up Google into 5 little companies. That hasn't taken a fifth of their wealth.
Yeah.
You completely if you the example I always talk about is like when women say, "Oh, I'm going to get half in the divorce." It's like you're going to get half the amount of money, but the square root of the usefulness of that money,
Right.
because half an amount of money isn't half the wealth. It's 10% of the wealth, and because now you've increased your expenses, you can't buy most things that you could buy. And if you broke up Google, then you're probably just inviting, with the way that there's no defined, like TikTok is Chinese, and you can't keep that out of a country. It doesn't work like that with the internet. So if America loses Google by breaking it up into however many different little companies, then you've got some Russian, Chinese, whatever company that can come along, or Bing, you never know, Bing, but another company just comes along and takes that spot.
Exactly.
So in a way, for you guys, it's an advantage actually having the big fish, because at least it's your big fish.
Yeah, it creates a vacuum, so like someone's going to be in charge.
Yeah.
But everybody wants to use the same search engine.
Exactly. I feel like it would be more complicated to try to break it up. Like you could improve its efficiency and try to make it more fair in whatever way, but I don't think it's ever gonna get broken up like they kind of want it to.
Yeah, I mean, I like the approach Facebook is taking now. So I think they are censoring, like maybe they are, well, they're definitely deleting posts or hiding them. But I like the approach where they just provide an alternative source on top of a video. So it's like, okay, now you're definitely being exposed to both sides. It's your choice if you want to read it or not.
Yeah.
Right. My only thing though is it does have to be more equal, because I'm definitely you're getting all these warnings on all conservative things, but we're not getting the balance stuff on the left. So I'm finding that when people post things on the left, it just kind of goes whatever, and then on the right, it's like you always get these little ticks at the end saying, "Yeah, but check this out too," and I've seen plenty of stuff that the left has put out that's in dispute. You know what I mean? Like, there was an article that somebody actually wrote an article about how racist Trump's administration is. Now, I'm not saying it isn't, but guess what? That's disputed. I mean, that is disputed. That is debatable. It is something that, people disagree with, and it's a discussion that's being had. So to me, that's like, I don't know, you can't just fact check one side, or you can't just give an alternate
I think
reference.
like Mark Zuckerberg rebutted that by saying that because the conservatives put out more false news, that's why it looks like they're getting fact checked harder, but in reality they're not. It's just that there's more false news coming from their side.
See, I don't believe that. I think that it's probably balanced. I think you get good information mixed with bad information, but I've seen it happen on both sides. And I mean, as far as which is more, I mean, there'd have to be a lot of experiments and stuff to really figure that out, I think. And in my opinion, just,
I saw a video yesterday. It was Stephen Fry who was doing the voiceover for it. It was talking about debunking a video that was saying that all these green windmills and all of that, they are polluting quite heavily to build them. And it's like, yes, that is a very valid point. And they were debunking and saying, oh, this is ridiculous. And the solution is Hyperloop. And it's like, if anybody with any background in engineering can just look at Hyperloop and go, well, that'll never work. And, they want to reply. And it's like, yeah, factually, the video was correct when it was talking about the emissions at different energy sources like solar, coal. They're technically correct when they're talking about the the numbers and the science, but then their proposed solutions are just they're never going to work. Just completely impractical. And there's a reason why Hyperloop has been designed for 200 years and never once been a successful prototype. Whereas the same guy who designed the first Hyperloop, Robert Goddard, rockets have landed on asteroids now. We've landed on Mars, we've landed on Venus, the moon, we've had men walk on the moon. So their proposed solution is just like, well, it was a good video until the last minute. It was like, well, your solutions are just never going to work. So, you've got that sort of, they're technically correct, but it's just unworkable.
Right.
And what sucks, like for Mark Zuckerberg, this guy just wanted people to talk to each other. Now it's like, hey man, you gotta be in charge of a country's communication. You gotta take over hacking. It's like, I didn't want this job.
Yeah.
So it's like, I don't blame him.
Right?
What was that, Eric?
I don't think he could ever predict or anticipate that this is what would come up. Is like rating people out.
Yeah.
But his first iteration of it was a dating site, wasn't it?
I think so.
Yeah, it was like you compare this person to this person, and then it puts it in a rank ordered hierarchy, and then it'll find you your date. And then the thing that really got it going was when they added the relationship status, because everybody wanted to know who was single.
So it's like, what would be hilarious is in the next 5 years, you see Tinder in Congress like, hey, Russians are hacking Tinder. What are you going to do about that?
Got all these Russian women coming here, and we don't know what to do.
So, like, and it's like, it's a bigger problem. It's like, the problem isn't, let's say, if, like, it's a valid point that, let's say, Russians are putting false information on Facebook. But to me, it's like, that's the citizens' problem. Like, it's like old people shouldn't believe everything that's on the internet.
Right.
It's the internet.
Yeah, I totally agree. That's
one thing that isn't serious, but it's a good example of this is you always see these computer-generated images of like the next generation aircraft, and it's like it's a computer-generated image. Any pilot would say that'll never work. And there's that one video where the whole cabin detaches from the aircraft in case of emergency and parachutes down. It's like, well, I don't even know where to start with that because parachutes don't work that way. How would you pressurize the cabin? What about the pilots? Most accidents in aviation, the first sign of the problem is below 1,000 feet. Well, those parachutes take 10,000 feet to open. And it's just like, I don't know how many times I've debunked these ridiculous, like, oh, we're going to have a circular runway. Why? It's a stupid idea. And all of this, and it's like, it just keeps cropping up again and again because somebody new goes, oh, that's cool. It's a computer generated image. It's like, there's that one design of the airliner where all the passengers land on a parachute in an emergency. It's like, that has been around 10 years. That CGI must be around 10 years by now. And people still pick it up and go, oh, great idea. This is the next generation. So once it's out there, it's out there forever.
True. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like a meme that just comes back around because enough people forgot about it.
Yeah, it just goes on and on and on. I think another thing about the internet is the user base is quite a young age, which might explain why it's so extremist.
Yeah, I mean, I would say definitely less conservative just because conservative people are usually older. But it's going to be really interesting the next 10, 20 years because, like, our age group, we grew up with it. Now we're the ones who are going to be in politics and in charge.
We're all going to be extremists, so the internet is going to be a little less extreme.
Maybe.
Nice.
I mean, there's a decent amount of old people on the internet too.
Yeah, so like I've noticed that too. Like,
I think they're the ones who follow follow for like the conspiracy theories and stuff more because they don't know how things work.
Yeah, that's the thing. Like older people, at the same time, they are joining the internet more. Like you have your grandmas, like, how's this work?
Yeah.
And yeah, like
Oh,
you said, now they have all the conspiracy things. So now all the, how should I say this? All the things that are people know is a scam, like the emails. All the parents and grandparents are still falling for it, and then
Yeah.
they're sharing that.
yeah,
Yeah.
my dad's terrible for fake news. Like he'll believe anything that jibes with his. If he doesn't like someone, it doesn't matter how obviously a meme it is, he'll believe it. And it's like I've been through, it's like, all right, first of all, look at the website. What's the website? And he's like, oh, so yeah, it's very difficult. He's 67, and it's like if it goes along with his preconceived notion, no matter how ridiculous it is, then he believes it, and it's very difficult.
Yeah.
And he gets really angry about it too. And it's like, okay, first of all, calm down. It's probably not real.
Yeah.
Yeah, or greatly exaggerated.
Hmm.
That's the other thing. You get a lot of news stories, I think, that are just really, really pumped up with a lot of views,
Exactly.
you know?
Yeah.
So,
So
Oh,
basically,
and then it makes it difficult. Like when the Guardian is not a very good news source, it exaggerates everything. But when they exaggerate everything, in England you've got Brexit, and then when they write something on Brexit, they try to exaggerate it. But the truth is like when you actually look at the information that the government's putting out, it's like, hang on, this Guardian article is no exaggeration, but no one's going to believe it because they exaggerate everything else.
yeah.
right.
So they've completely ruined their credibility, but the actual information the British government's putting out about Brexit, it's like, yeah, they've bought fields all alongside the motorways for trucks to park in. It's like, that's true. That's what the government say they've done.
I think it's like also like this year it was more difficult just with COVID and people not going outside. So like all their information was coming from online.
Yeah.
And when everything's exaggerated online, then it makes things a lot harder to navigate.
Very true.
So
Also,
basically,
desensitizes us.
it's our job to not get outdated with technology. So the next 20 years, we got to be on top of it. There's TikTok or there's going to be a new web app. It's like we have to learn everything so we don't become like old.
Yeah. But that's been the rule for decades. I mean, even back in the early 1900s, there's always been more technology that the new generation needs to learn, you know?
Yeah, and like yeah, that's
Versus to change an oil in your car, you know?
exactly.
So,
Like propaganda isn't new. There's always been misinformation for like as long as
yeah.
news has been spread and recorded.
Yeah, it's like I don't want to be like the old guy in Congress, like, how does this work? And the kid's like, oh my God, I just said it 5 times. I want to be the old guy that can
Well,
like
that's-
trick a little kid. And it's like, gotcha.
That's something that I find interesting too. Everybody that I talk to, I don't care what political side you're on, everybody wants term limits for politicians. But yet it's funny, it just doesn't ever get talked about or really brought up much when it gets to a certain point, does it? It's like,
Funny how that works.
yeah, the one thing that we're not divided on, and we can't get it done. You know what I mean? It's like, that's
The people against it are the people who are actually there.
doing, right, exactly. It's crazy.
They just
So-
keep losing that email. It just never gets to them somehow.
Yep. But that I find really frustrating. But yeah, reaches a certain point and then we just don't talk about it. I don't know.
So, curious, like, where does everyone, just to start broadly, where does everyone stand on like freedom of speech? Like, what's
I
a
think it's
reasonable
very
line?
important.
I'm sorry, what?
I think freedom of speech is very important. I know it has implications, but you know, if you like obviously as a news reporter, you can't say there's a fire going on when there isn't.
Right,
Like somewhere, because then you're putting so many people in danger. So I think like depending on the position you have, there should be like standards, criterias, and rules you follow. And if you mess up, then there should be like consequences for that. But I still think in terms of just like, you know, basic free speech, people should be able to voice their opinions and whatnot. And I don't know, probably stand somewhere the same as most of you guys do. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm pretty similar. I feel like pretty much free speech across the board, minus threatening physical violence or death.
Yeah.
Short of that, I'm pretty open with it. I think it's our job to figure out what's right and what's not right. And even like Jordan Peterson has said many times, bad information, it can be used as a stepping stone to good information. I don't know if that's how we worded it, but you know, that's how both sides get better. Is they learn from the bad information on the other side. But you got to be willing to talk about it. Instead of just. So free speech, I think, are pretty much across the board.
Yeah, and I think we've done like a pretty good job on it so far. Like I know they tend to like like obviously there's always like cops and stuff investigating any kind of organized crime activity that's taking place online, and they'll do whatever to like stop that, which I think is good. But like for anyone just saying like, oh, like I don't like, I don't know, like Muslim people or like this religion or like whatever, and like I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Like I don't think that counts as hate speech and it should be censored. Like people have
right, because I think that it will. I mean, other than a few idiots that might latch onto that and say, "Yeah, right on, I agree with that." I really don't live in a world where that's got any footing. I mean, it really, I mean, people would hear that and dismiss it. I think for the most part, regardless of political. I think that, I think most people do feel that way.
Yeah.
If anything, you're going to get pushback, and that might sort of pull you more in line with what's reasonable.
Right.
You say, "Oh, I hate Muslims," and well, there are Muslims around who say, "Why? Like, what have you got against me?" And you'll get more guidance from being unacceptable.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, so it's like it self-corrects.
Like everything.
Sure. Yep.
Especially with everything going on, like in France and stuff. I don't know if you guys have been keeping up with that, but like that was awful, and I can't believe we're still like struggling with that issue, even though like 5 years ago they already had like all those attacks and had to deal with it, and now it's like the same thing kind of repeating itself with like the Muslim countries and like.
I think a slight. I think Macron is taken. He's got a. I agree with what he's done. For example, recently they've banned homeschooling.
Yeah.
Well, they've actually looked at the problem and said, right, well, who are these terrorists? Nearly all of them were born in France. Nearly all of them grew up here. The Bataclan's attackers, they were born and grew up in Nantes, not too far away from me. They were homeschooled. They never really left their clique, and they were in terrible conditions. Where they lived was a horrible road. And what they're trying to do now, they ban homeschooling. They want kids to go to, and there are Catholic schools. I suppose there, in theory, could be Muslim schools as well. But the curriculum is controlled and it's secular. So basically, you have to go to school and you have to mix. I think that's a good idea, because if you, as a kid you grow up and you mix with people, very hard to hate them. If you, they're trying to break up these ghettos and trying to stop these little neighborhoods falling into below poverty standards of living, because that just breeds that just breeds extremists. No matter what. I mean, the other thing is France also has a history before.
Yeah, that's the thing.
All of
Because
this.
they have a history, there's already like that tension, and then like if you
Yeah,
don't,
and before the Muslims were the ones doing most of the attacks in the southwest of the region, France, southwest, way south of Bordeaux. You've got the Basque region, and the Basques, ethnically very different. They're huge nose, huge ears, they're very strong. Apparently, they speak their own language, and in Spain and France, they've wanted independence for their country, their region, for a long time, and their area is the Pyrenees, and it takes part of Spain, part of France, that area. And there was more in Spain. They were more fighting the Spanish government than the French, but there were a lot of terrorist attacks back in the 80s. So, and they dealt with this by mixing kids in the schools. You got to get kids all going to the same schools. You got to get them connected to the country much better, but connected to the services of the country and employed, and get them out of living in below the national standard. And that's really worked. There hasn't been Basque attacks in a long time. The Islamic attacks that have happened recently, it comes down to intolerance. That is the ideology there is, you are not allowed to offend me.
exactly. And I think that's the problem. And you know, it's a common problem. It's really bad with like the whole Islamic world, but it's also an issue now in like academia, for an example, which is what Jordan Peterson was talking about. But yeah, like in terms of like the whole like Muslim world and like Muslims versus France and whatever, like there are so many things wrong with that. Like if sure, like yeah, we shouldn't discriminate based on someone's religion, but at the same time we shouldn't block speech just because like it's just so stupid, because there are actually a lot of things wrong with religion. And you know, if those things don't get talked about, if people can't have like reasonable discussions about like the things that are like wrong in the religion, then it's never going to get solved, and you're just going to keep seeing the same problems over and over and over again. And
Yeah.
Another thing that I've noticed, which is I've a lot of these issues are a lot more regional than just religion. Like, you know, in Indonesia, 80% of the world's Muslims are in Indonesia, and there really isn't very many attacks. The attacks that have happened in France aren't from Moroccans. So Moroccans are Muslim, they speak Arabic, French is a second language, but the attacks haven't been from Moroccans. The attacks have been from Algerians, Middle Easterns, and Tunisians. Now, France has a history with Algeria, Tunisia, all of these countries that these guys come from, or ethnically come from. But for the most part, the attackers were born here, grew up here, but in their own society, isolated from France. And to me, I see it a little bit more as a regional issue than just, they do have the defined beliefs that are different. And the problem I see with Islam is that the state is the religion. They don't have there's no secularism at all.
yeah.
And as long as they can live here, respect that we have a separate government, and I think the line is violence from being offended is unacceptable. You can be as offended as you want, but but that's the limit. You can talk, but you can't
over a cartoon. Like,
yeah, well, I mean, what next is going to offend them? Who knows? The fact that that I'm an infidel, well, that offends them. Does that offend? Violence from offense is unacceptable, and we have a secular government. Those are non-negotiables.
So just just to clarify a little bit, the attacks on France, the people, because you said most of the attacks are from people that were born and raised in France.
Yeah.
Would you say
Yeah.
that maybe, because like you said, they're trying to break up the ghettos because there's a pattern. People at, let's say, the lowest, they're the ones who grow up to be the terrorist.
Mm.
Do you think maybe I'm generalizing, but they're attacking France out of resentment for their upbringing and everything, as opposed to
Oh yeah,
their
it's not
religion?
it's definitely not just the religion. It's way more complex than that.
That's just what they put on the
Yeah,
surface.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's also they grow up different. That sucks. They're much poorer than other people in France. They don't mix. It's the perfect recipe for radicalization.
Yeah.
And like the guy, the truck attacker in Nice, he was actually from Tunisia, but he'd lived most of his life here. They don't actually attribute that to religion. The investigation says that he was mentally ill and just didn't have any friends, and well, that's not good. So yeah, religion and the offense. That's what they're thinking, but that thinking only really comes from being so isolated and.
Yeah,
and
I think
resentful.
isolation and exclusion and stuff like
Hmm.
that always creates radicalization. Like even in US, it's like all the
Yeah.
kind of states in the middle, like they're so secluded from the rest of US, and where like all the big cities and like all the big cities are, and all like the more educated people are, and because they feel so secluded from that, then like they want to, that's why like it creates that division as well. And
Yeah, and I think you're totally right, and I think on even another level, the social media kind of does that too. I find a lot of times people circle the wagons. It's like human nature, I guess, as things especially
Yeah.
start to amplify. Because now Parler's out as the antithesis to Twitter. That's, I mean, I feel like that stuff's expected when things like if a certain group, if enough group of people don't feel welcome on that one source, they're going to separate, circle the wagons,
Yeah.
and you're going to get, and that goes either way. I mean, I guarantee that if Parler had come out first and it had just been this giant conservative thing, and I mean, liberals probably would have gotten on there because it was the only thing, but if they felt isolated, eventually that would have happened anyway. It would have, I think either belief would have
Yeah.
behaved the same way, would have done the same thing,
Exactly.
So when you see that kind of stuff, I think that's where you got to look at it. You got to say, okay, well, when that starts to happen, it's like, well, something's wrong over here. Somebody's not getting hurt. People aren't getting hurt.
Exactly.
So
Um,
so what do you
Yeah.
say about I think maybe George was you that said, violence, that's the line. But the
Yeah.
thing is, like, we've heard this a lot before. Okay, well, on the left, well, your speech is violence.
I tend
Like
not
that.
to believe it. I don't believe in that. I
Yeah,
think
me
that, I mean,
neither.
I understand what they're saying when they say it, but what I'm hearing them saying is it's just extreme offense. It's like I've heard that, if you argue, if you make an argument, you might be invalidating the other person's
Yeah.
existence or something. It's, I personally think that's an extreme way to look at it. I think that, and if
I
somebody
think,
does invalidate your existence, I mean, unless a massive government invalidates your existence, who cares if a couple people do? I don't know.
I mean,
That's just my
it
opinion.
is true that like, like groups that are more oppressed, or like they're more of a minority, that they'll face more prejudice and stuff because, but it's not a reason to like try to prevent the prejudice against them, to like just eliminate all speech from people who might have a prejudice against them just because they're offended. Like it doesn't make them threaten their existence. It
Right.
might make it more difficult for them, but it doesn't threaten their existence. It doesn't mean that they're dead. Like,
Right.
so there should be ways for them to like, or like they should find other ways to like combat that instead of stopping those people from being able to talk. That's not going to solve the problem.
Yeah, I think like one key thing is like they have, let's say they have a valid point that it does offend them and affects their mental health and hurts them. But it's like I think one thing is you need to show, or they need to be showed how if you go down this path, it'll actually hurt you in the long run.
Exactly.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
When they talk about speech is violence, what sort of harm are, like they're just talking about? Are they talking about direct upset? Because the thing is, right? If people can say things to you that really hurt you, when someone leaves you, that hurts. Was that violence?
That's their point. They
Yeah.
introduced this into the continuum now. So it's
I
like
think
mental
it's
health, all
more
that's
like
related.
mental health. Like when they say that, it's more about like, you know, if people keep treating a group this way, they're gonna like kill themselves. That's more what they mean by the speech is violence, or it's gonna attract like extremist groups to like, I don't know, kill them, but that very rarely happens.
So it's kind of like incitation, like when you incite violence. That's where I
Or I
think their
guess if it was
strongest point.
like the Black Lives Matter, that's where that argument would come up as well, I think. Where
Yeah.
people would say these attitudes or like these thoughts against the Black community need to stop, because then that is giving more power for cops to like kill Black people. But I mean, I don't know like I don't know what you guys think about that or whatever. Like I wasn't in the US, so I
No,
never hear it's definitely not as bad.
I
So
suppose I don't understand enough about the claim.
yeah.
I don't understand enough about the claim to say to have a proper argument against it. To me, it just doesn't sound right. But I don't really understand what they mean when they say your words are violence.
so it's like, for
How does that work?
example, and okay, because when I talk to people, I always say, for example, the left does have a valid point. Because sometimes, there are conservatives that are like, hey, I just want to have this discussion, but they're not being genuine. They just want to antagonize and just have the discussion to dehumanize other people. But it is a discussion worth having, but they're not coming into it genuinely.
No.
Yeah, I do see that sometimes, like, and I kind of get it too, because sometimes, like, you know, like more conservative people, they're like sick of all this complaining and like just BS from the left side. So then like they start seeing like any kind of concern, like, oh, here goes like another fucking complaint, and then like they don't want to take it seriously, and then like they don't end up hearing the other side properly. So yeah, that's where that comes from.
I think
So
that's
like,
very
and then like one example is like, just to be crazy, it's like, because the U.S., we had the Jim Crow laws. There was a time when, let's say, Black people could not enter restaurants. It was like whites only. And let's say a conservative person, hey, let's have this topic. Is this really a legal thing to do? What's the relationship between this and freedom? And let's say a Black person could be like, this is violence because you're entertaining this idea that will give people who are racist and such in that group more courage to act on their feelings and on that, let's say, their personality to be more racist and etc. So that's why I believe they say violence can be, or speech can be a form of violence when you use it as a form to incite or to encourage it. But that's where it gets really blurry. It's really vague. And again, for me, it's like you gotta show them how that can hurt them in the long run if they're not able to have these open conversations.
Mhm. Yeah, and yeah, I mean, there's always going to be people who are ignorant and stuff, but that doesn't mean you should stop them from speaking. Like, you just,
Well, the other thing too is, I mean, a lot of people don't, I mean, are very resistant to ever changing their minds. But I
yeah,
think that the best chance you have to ever change someone's mind is to be polite, first and foremost. You know, to at least like the minute you attack somebody or call somebody stupid or tell them they're ignorant, you're not changing anybody's mind. You've just
exactly.
you created a battle. You
Yeah.
know, so I don't know. That's
And something else for me is like, let's say there are some things that are just obvious to us. Like, can I murder someone if I want their PS5? Is that really a bad thing? Some people will be like, we shouldn't even talk about things like this. There are some things that should not be open for discussion. My approach is like, there should never be the approach of a question being too obvious to ask that you shouldn't ask it is wrong. You shouldn't say, well, it's so obvious. The right approach should be, well, the answer is so obvious. So you gotta keep giving them the obvious answer
very good.
as opposed
Very
to
good.
silencing the question.
Yes, excellent point. Totally
So,
agree with you.
yeah. So someone
Yeah.
says, like, this is I don't know, what's something dumb? Hey, man, you're sharpening the pencil the wrong way. Let's not even talk about it. You gotta, like, show them, look, this is the right way.
Right, right.
And I
Hold on
think
one moment,
that's
guys.
what, when
Like,
you point
personally,
out the absurdity, how obvious it is, it makes the person asking the question look dumb or be like, oh, yeah, you're right.
yeah, personally, my opinion, having grown up with all sorts of races and different countries around me, I think racism is the stupidest reason to hate someone. But yeah, I've had to explain that to people at times, and it's worth explaining to people. It's like, well, yeah, they're from somewhere else. Yeah, they've got different skin color. They can be just as intelligent or just as dumb as anybody else. Skin color is it defines so little about you. It you know it you know, and when you explain that to some people, that might be the first time they've heard it. Um, and so yeah, no, sometimes to me, yeah, something might be obvious, but somebody might not have heard that before. They just heard, oh, racism's wrong. Why? Because it's wrong. Well, why is it wrong? You know, they might need a bit more. They might need a bit more of a fundamental understanding of what's going on, and because some people, they might not have ever had to think about it, and then they fall into a crowd that is racist. So why not? It's like, yeah, if you understand, say, racism, or killing someone for their PS5, that isn't abundantly obvious that that's wrong in South Africa. The crime rate in South Africa is horrendous, and people who grew up outside of the cities, it's a perfectly normal way to get something is robbery, and the reason why is because the South African government doesn't have the resources to fight nearly a fraction of the crime that goes on. So if you're not going to get caught, why not? People who are uneducated and come from very, these are not tribal, but have been forced to live in ramshackle conditions by people in the cities. Then they don't like the people in the cities, and they don't seem to get caught. So what's wrong? It's they've made us live here. We take their stuff. Way of life. So yeah, as you say, outlawing the question is a dangerous way of going about it, because the answer, yeah, sure, you might have to think, but yeah, people who've never heard the answer before might need to hear it.
Yeah, and then for me, it's like, It's not just showing them the logic of it. You know, if they want to think logically, sure, but showing them the practicality.
Mm.
Like I always like look at the comic route. Like for example, just to do the race thing. I think everybody knows someone who's dumb or incompetent of their own race, and it's like, for example, if there was like a redneck racist white guy, it's like, hey, would you want your cousin to do brain surgery on you, or this black surgeon who has a doctor's degree? Who do you think is gonna do better?
Mm. Now, what was his name? The Republican neurosurgeon.
Was it Herman? No, it's not Herman Cain. It's Ben
No,
Carson.
Carson, Ben Carson, that was
Yeah.
it. Like, yeah, the thing I don't understand about Ben Carson is that he would deny evolution, but it's like, dude, you got top marks in neuroscience. It's like how like I understand people like have you guys seen Destin on Smarter Every Day on YouTube? Oh, brilliant channel. He does
Type that.
rockets and like Rocket Power Golf Club and
What do you guys usually watch, by the way, to like get information, ideas, opinions?
sorry.
Like
What do
what?
you guys usually watch or read to get like information, ideas, opinions, and whatnot?
Well, personally, I've read 12 Rules for Life. I've read a couple books like that. I've recently read a book, really good book, called My Life with Murderers. It's about a prison governor in England. He was the youngest prison governor.
I just
He's
imagine like, yeah, my neighbor's a murderer, and I just hang out with him.
Yeah, it was kind of like that. He was a prison governor, and he's worked on rehabilitating criminals, and he's written a few books, and they're very good. And he talks about how to deal with people who are psychopaths and how to treat people who have, you know, what causes most crime. And yeah, he reckons that alcohol is responsible for about half of murders. And humiliation. If someone's drunk and humiliated, they're way more likely to commit murder than before. So you know, like a lot of ideas. I've gotten a lot of ideas from a few books that I haven't read nearly as many books as I'd like to, but books. You know, like you see, a guy like Milo Yiannopoulos. It's like
Oh yeah.
you don't. It's not that you get ideas from him; it's that you reject ideas from him in a way.
I like watching Joe Rogan podcasts. They're usually-
Oh, they're great.
Yeah, like because he's like the least biased. I find you could find like so many, and he'll like interview so many different kinds of people, and like so you get like a lot of variety from him.
Yeah, I think we might have mentioned him the first time we did this discussion. It was last
Yeah.
time, like 2 weeks ago, because he had, let's say, I think it was like a vegan and this other guy,
Oh my god.
and he like thing is he really allowed them
But yeah.
to like
he
break
did.
it down. Like, no, you
That
can't skip over this
podcast
topic.
was like 3 hours long. It was crazy.
Mm.
The one with the guy from Game Changers.
I think so.
Yeah, like he did the documentary on how like you could make veganism work and you don't need meat at all. And then like it was that guy versus like like a food scientist or something who like shows that no, we still do need some meat in our diet.
Got to.
The episodes with Jordan Peterson are actually really, really in depth and quite interesting.
Yeah, I
as
think
well.
like Bert Weinstein, he was there. To me, Bert is a really good person who like moderates. Like, okay, you're trying to say this, you're trying to say this, and it brings it together.
Yeah. So
No,
I guess
he's
I
a
watched.
biologist, isn't he?
I listened to like those, like his podcasts. I would watch more Jordan Peterson when he was initially popular, because like, so since I'm like I was in Toronto, so like I saw him rise to his fame, like with the whole like when he went against the whole like gender pronoun thing.
So you're an OG fan.
Yeah, pretty much an OG fan. So I watched all of his stuff when it was very new, and like his like he did his like lectures. He would do like talk about every myth and like what was it called? I don't even remember.
So like archetypes. I have his book,
Yeah,
Maps
like
of
the
Meaning.
100. Yeah, it was pretty much like maps of meaning, but live version. He would talk about like a different concept each time, like a religious concept. And yeah, I did like I liked him. Like now, I don't really like for the last 2 years. I haven't really watched any of his stuff anymore.
I mean,
Like I read a bit of his book, not all of it. I just took like the main ideas from 12 Rules. Um, and yeah, like I do appreciate everything he's brought because I feel like, it was very refreshing to like when he was new because nothing like no one who thinks like him had ever come to fame or whatever before. So it was
What
really
was your
cool.
initial impression of how exactly did you come by him, and what was your initial impression?
Well, I first came like when he was in the news for the gender pronoun thing. That's how I first heard of him, and I was like, "Oh, who's this guy?" Like he was so controversial, and like people started hating me because I liked him because everyone always wants to be on the side of the good guy, and like he obviously didn't sound or come across like a good guy. But
Hmm.
I like my whole entire life, I've always been like a devil's advocate, and I always want to listen to both sides. So, I gave him a chance. It's like, oh, like, he makes sense. Like, I agree with a lot of the things he's saying. Like, but most people just want to overlook that. So,
yeah.
people were like, oh my God, how do you like him? Like, even my own sister, she's like, ah. It was funny.
Yeah.
So, imagining in Toronto, sorry, you're obviously an ethnic minority where you
Yeah.
are.
And yeah, that's like because I know more minorities, they were like that's why I knew even more people who are like, what the hell? Why do you like him? Like he hates us. Like why would you like someone like that? I'm like, no, that's not true. Like, um, but yeah, like I never saw him as someone bad. I didn't agree with everything he said, obviously, but I still like gave him a chance. And yeah, I didn't agree with all his like views or opinions on like certain groups that, especially like with certain things he didn't have as much experience with. I find that I saw his biases. But like when it comes to like basic psychology and like, personal responsibility, like that stuff all made sense to me. And I'm like, yeah, like, people should be listening to this stuff that he says.
So like,
Um,
just curious, what things do you disagree with him about? It's like, if you could be specific.
Yeah, I mean, it's been a long time, so I don't even remember, but like, there are some things that he's said about women. Um, I can't even remember anymore. So yeah, I'm sorry. I'd have to like dig into it and remember what exactly I disagreed with him on. But in general, like as I started watching him more over like the next 2 years from like 2016, I remember I started getting a bit less interested because I found that almost every like I still like him, but like I found that almost every opinion he comes across, I feel like it's his limitation as a psychologist, I guess, because it's not like his expertise or specialty or whatever, but like that he I found he gave like religious beliefs or like mythology and all that stuff a bit too much credit. And like I liked it at first because it was such a new way of thinking for me. Like, and it makes so much sense. Like, why wouldn't we like religion has played such a huge role in our world, like, all our social behavior, mannerisms, and thoughts, ways we live our lives out has evolved from that. Like, whether we choose to call ourselves religious or not, it's still derived from all of that. So it does make sense to look at that and look at the relevance of religion. But at the same time, I did find that he gave religion like after like watching his stuff a lot, like I was like, okay, he does give a bit too much credit to using religion all the time as a result of how we got to where we are. Like he's like, oh, if you want to think of everything from like an evolutionary point of view, like let's look at like what this religious myth said and like how it's influenced where we are today. But like I think there's way more to just religion to explain things. And that's why I feel like that's why I look at like other philosophers and stuff, or people like scientists and stuff, because they can actually, instead of just that, like it's a bit more concrete, like more reliable.
Yeah.
The sources they're using to base their theories on, instead of just religion all the time. Like he's a bit too abstract sometimes. That's what I find.
Yeah. I mean, before I read 12 Rules for Life, I'd read quite a bit of Richard Dawkins, and that's just purely fact, scientific. It's very hard to extrapolate a sort of, when they talk about the altruistic gene, it's like, yeah, you can see why being altruistic will help you pass the genes on, and it's very difficult to sort of extract a modus operandi out of it. You can see what works evolutionarily. You can see what works, what's good for a species. But
I feel like
initially,
it's a combination of all of it. It's not just like one person who's not right. It's not just like, oh, you can only like Peterson's right or only Dawkins is right. Like you need a combination of all these people's point of view and then combine it, and then it could give you like a better perspective on everything. Like even Sam Harris, a lot of people don't like him, but I started liking him more. Like, so after I went through a phase of Peterson, then I went into a phase of Sam Harris. and then I was like, Sam Harris is fucking amazing. Like I like him more than Peterson. But then like Sam Harris also has his flaws and like weaknesses. Like he's a bit too anti-religion, like the opposite problem of Peterson.
Yeah.
But like there's so many things he says also that just make way more sense, because he's not being too abstract. He's just looking at things that are already agreed upon and seeing where we can go from that. So it's easier to listen to him, I find.
I find his voice difficult to listen to, though. Like it's just too.
I did at first, but then I just I just got into him.
Maybe you should look at his face.
No, like he's a neuroscientist, and I used to work with a neuroscientist at a coffee shop, and there's a sort of parallel sort of there's a lot of parallels. Like with Guy Conrad, I used to work with. He was 6'7" tall. He was from Poland, and he was a neuroscientist. And I worked at this coffee shop when he was doing his PhD, and it was. People used to think he was an idiot, and it's like, no, you think he's an idiot because he's just talking so much faster than you at such a mentally higher level. It's hard to understand until he slows down, and there's a lot of unexpected. It's hard to predict what the guy's going to say.
Yeah.
And,
like when I started listening to Jordan, like I got interested in him just through his lectures. I ran into him. He was talking about depression, and then he came up as the me with Kathy Newman. It's like, oh wait, that's the same guy. And then you kind of go down the rabbit hole. And I've listened to Sam Harris independently, and then they started meeting up, and then the whole IDW.
What did you think of Sam Harris?
I think it's like the same thing, because like he did an interview with Cenk, the Young Turks, TYT. It had to do with like Islam, and how Harris was concerned with generally the religion as a whole could be more dangerous than like other religions, and that was like a whole thing. I was like, okay, I think I see where he's coming from. There's something going on there. But then just hearing him speak with other people is like, all right, so far everything seems to make sense. I started hearing his podcast a little bit, but I kind of
Mhm.
stopped. I don't listen to
Yeah.
him a ton. I heard a lot of Jordan stuff, and now like I'm hearing like the Weinsteins. Like I heard a little bit of Eric, a little bit of Brett
Mhm.
because he's a evolutionary biologist, and there's some really interesting stuff there. But I also
Yeah.
heard I used to listen to. I'm still like a fan, if you want to call it that, of Slavoj Žižek, and like his stuff is really interesting. I love his jokes. Like, have you guys ever heard of Slavoj?
Yeah, I saw the debate between Slavoj Žižek and Peterson,
Yeah.
Mhm.
uh,
So,
and
so like one of Slavoj's like famous jokes, because Slavoj's like interested in the subconscious. And he's from Yugoslavia, so like communism kind of messed up their country. But one of, or I should say, two of his best jokes are like, there's this guy who's afraid of a chicken because he thinks he's a kernel of corn. He thinks the chicken's gonna eat him. So he goes to a
Mhm.
therapist, gets it all worked out and cool. But then he goes back to the therapist. He's like, the chicken's gonna eat me. And he's like, what? We fixed this. What's going on? You know you're not a kernel of corn. He's like, yeah, I know that. But does the chicken know that? And then, like, from a scientific perspective, this guy goes to a scientist's house and he's like, hey, I noticed you have a horseshoe above your door. And it's like a mythological thing, like a religious thing. It's like, but you're a man of science. He's like, oh yeah, I don't believe it works, but I heard it still works even if you don't believe in it. So it's just like, so I'm always interested in like the unconscious stuff. And he rambles a lot, but there's a lot of perspectives that's like, oh, that's interesting.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Nice.
I think.
What about you?
Oh, go ahead.
Oh no, I was just gonna ask, because you came in later.
Yeah.
Erica, what about you? Are there other people like you listen to
Well, so
or
I listen to Jonathan
or
Haidt
stuff
a
you
little
follow?
bit. Have you ever heard of him?
Who?
Yeah.
Yeah, I listen to everybody you guys just listen to. I listen to as well. Well, pretty much that intellectual dark web. I feel like there's just a
Yeah.
good group of people that have different views that actually know how to have discussions with each other. Just the other night on Twitter, I know Eric and Sam Harris were kind of going back and forth with a little bit of a debate about the whole election thing, and I thought it was an interesting conversation. They were, they disagreed with each other, but I don't know. It was just a civil, interesting conversation that looked like if you listen to it long enough, it would go somewhere.
Yeah.
So yeah, I pretty much listen to the same people there. I was going to ask all you guys: have you guys listened to the biblical series that Jordan Peterson did?
Oh, that's what I was talking about. Yeah. So that's what it was called because I forgot what it was
Yeah.
called.
Yeah.
But no, I did follow that when he started that. Like I don't think I watched every single episode, but like I watched most of them as they were coming out, like back
Yep.
when he was.
I
when he
watched. I
started
watched
that.
some. I watched some of them.
Mhm.
At time limited.
Yeah.
So a question for Rebecca. Just curious. Are you religious? Are you from a religious background?
Yeah, I did grow up like my parents are.
Mm.
My dad mainly, like my parents are both Muslim. My dad still follows and practices the religion. They never tried to like enforce it on us too much. Like they tried when we were kids to like get us involved more for like the community aspect, but like not as much intensely as some other like Muslim families are. But yeah, like from a young age, I think when I was like 12 or 13, I was like, this is all bullshit.
It's not for you. Just curious.
But you didn't tell your dad that.
What region are your family from? Okay, so you were born in Toronto,
I was
and
born in Vancouver and then
sorry, Vancouver.
pretty much spent most of my life
Yeah.
in Canada.
So what region were your family from, and like
Bangladesh.
what sort of community did you grow up in? Was it nice and
Yeah, they're from Bangladesh. And what type of community did I grow up in?
was it sort of isolated Bangladeshi, or was it like
No.
mixed in with the rest of the Canadians?
Yeah, I was mixed. It was probably so yeah, in Vancouver, I guess they had like a bigger, like a wider Bangladeshi family circle and like friends and stuff. And then when they moved to GTA, like they just got too busy and like they didn't have as much time to like make those like as many like to get involved in the like Bangladeshi community circle or whatever. So like I guess that's why like with religion they just practiced it more themselves and didn't try as hard to enforce it on us. And then like with me and my siblings, we just like, you know, we went to school like assimilated with the rest of the kids and like
Yeah.
and then we realized that religion's bullshit. So like yeah.
So it's like, that's funny because I have a friend who's from Bangladesh. Well, yeah, I think she was from Bangladesh, but like her family kind of grew up here. So I kind of
Yeah.
hung out with them and like got introduced into like the culture and the community.
Yeah.
And that the community is really a really big thing.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I was like learning about Jordan and talking about this with her. So it's like it kind of clashes a bit, but then it's like, oh, I think it just sounds similar to the experience you went through. Because then you kind of tell other people about it. It's like, well, what the fuck are you talking about?
Yeah. And there are definitely like communities still in like Toronto area, like Bangladeshi communities who are probably a bit more like still a bit more religious because they've held on to that community identity more. So like it's whereas my family, they didn't like push us into that community as much. So with the families that did push them into that community, they kind of stayed in this little bubble and like had the same thoughts instead of like assimilating as much. And that's why they still would call themselves religious or whatnot.
Yeah.
Did you go on to university and
Yeah.
what did you study?
Environmental science. Actually, I'm in university right now because
Oh.
I started my degree and then I like quit school because it's just like I don't want to waste money. I don't know if this is what I want to do. And then now I'm back in school again, actually, after like 5 years of taking a break.
Nice.
5
That's
years.
good.
It's a break.
Yeah. Because I'm like, no, this is 100% what I want to do. And yeah, and it's harder to move up without my degree, and it's not going to take that long anyway, so whatever.
Yeah.
No, that's good. That's good.
So just curious, like, so Eric kind of said what he listens to right now. Who are you listening to now? Like, are you in a certain phase with someone or a couple of people? Like Rebecca or George.
Well, Jordan Peterson took a big break for his health. I still watch some of his clips, but more just the clips occasionally. I've watched a lot of. Does anybody else know Thunderfoot?
No.
On YouTube? He does science videos, but mainly I've been talking about that book, My Life with Murderers. Read that recently, but it's sort of odd because when I first moved here, I got into a big phase of learning about French history and French what goes on here, and I've been reading about the Soviet space program a lot, and reading that sort of got me into what sort of showed me how little I understood about communism and the Russian system. And I worked with a guy who was from Georgia, so I ended up talking quite a lot about the Soviet, asking, and I learned a little bit of Russian from him. And basically, right now, I'm on a big kick of reading things about the Soviet Union and how the space program worked there and Soviet cosmonauts. Because before I came here, I read a lot about all the astronauts, NASA astronauts. Another great book I read a long time ago, I say long time ago, 5 years ago, was An Astronaut's Guide to Life on Earth. I read that before 12 Rules, and that was from Canadian astronaut Chris Hadfield.
Oh yeah.
I've met him. He's a great guy, and his book is it's absolute practical stuff. Like, if you have a goal, this is how you do it. If preparation, and he talks about how he got to be a fighter pilot in the Canadian Air Force, which is what I always wanted to be. So on the F-18, same aeroplane. So I read that book a few times, and he was talking about how to prepare for a flight, which basically for him was he would drive the route in his car, then he would sit in the hangar in the aeroplane the night before and go through every switch change that he was going to do. And great career and very interesting. And he talks about a lot more when he was getting into the astronaut training about, he'd learn how to fly these machines, but now he's really got to learn how to fly with other people, because he was always a F-18 as a single seater, and you have a defined job. You're a wingman, you're an element lead, or you're a flight lead or a squadron leader. Whereas on the International Space Station, you're a pilot, you're a dentist, you're a priest. He's an ordained priest so that he can give someone the last rites if they need. He's done courses in dentistry so that they can mend their teeth on the International Space Station. The list of things that you have to be a good spaceship commander really round out your skills as a person. And so that's a book I always recommend, An Astronaut's Guide to Life on Earth. And you have to be easy to get on with too. You're in a tin can with 6 people.
Yeah.
You have to learn how to moderate differences between people, and as commander especially, you have to get on with people well.
Yeah,
and,
to be an astronaut is ridiculously competitive. Well, not just that, but you have to be competent in multiple areas. It's like this people like have multiple masters. You need to be like in tip-top shape. Like I was in the Navy or I was in the Army. Like you can't just be good at one thing to be an astronaut. And then you have to be, like you said, really social.
Yeah, another book that came out last year was British astronaut Tim Peake wrote a book on how to pass astronaut selection. That was it. The whole book is just how to pass astronaut selection. And it's like they do this on day one at ESA in Cologne. They do this test where you basically arm wrestle someone. And the goal is to touch your hands for as many touches on the table as possible. And he said the clever thing to do is to just let the other guy do all the work, because it's number of hand touches that count, not who won. So it's like how to work with people. And he was working with French astronaut Thomas Piquet, and he was talking about how when they were in this cave, and of course in astronaut selection, everybody's watching you all the time. So, they were talking about there was somebody who didn't make it through selection, but the whole point is that these two helped the guy as much as they could to get their particular mission for that day done. And the guy they were talking about, he didn't make it through selection, but these two got really good marks because they took this guy under their wing and they helped him. And they could see that, this guy's really tired. So we're going to take his backpack off him for the day and we're going to help him out. And real good skills for life. Sort of how to be a leader, how to be a good person.
Nice. Now, Rebecca, is there anyone that you're listening to now?
No. So yeah, since like I said, I went through the Peterson phase and then after the Sam Harris phase. And now I just kind of listen to everything. I do appreciate podcasts because then you get like a lot more variety, like of opinions and or thought, like from different thinkers, I guess.
Yeah.
Like with Joe Rogan or even Sam Harris's podcast. and then like I'll read articles and stuff, but I haven't had the time to like really dive into books or just stick to one person. But yeah, if you guys like, do you guys have that book sounds interesting. Do you guys have like recommendations of like, or what do you guys like? What do you guys say you follow more? Like, do you lean towards like looking more at philosophy or more on like politics and stuff like that?
I think
Definitely.
I'm kind of doing both because like it's kind of like with Eric was doing with like you mentioned the IDW. It's kind of like how you mentioned before. You take a little bit of everything. That's what I liked about Jordan and like how everyone else was coming up, like with Brett. Like you see religion and evolutionary biology, and it's like everything's like fucking connected in psychology.
Exactly. Yeah, that's why I like getting like a variety of different opinions.
Yeah, so like for me, like I'm reading Maps of Meaning right now,
Mhm.
and I'm trying to find if you've seen a lot of Jordan's videos, a lot of it's like a little bit repetitive. It's like, okay,
Yeah.
I've I've
Mhm.
actually seen this,
Yeah.
but I'm trying to find places where I disagree with him. You know, I'm trying to be like critical and maybe
Right.
where he could articulate better. But I'm trying
Like I
to
was saying, like how I like how he thinks more like creatively and but sometimes yeah, for me he could just become a bit too abstract. And
yeah.
that's why like I do prefer people who are more based on like concrete evidence or like looking at agreed upon science and stuff. Um so I appreciate like more and more I've been appreciating thinkers like that. Just because I've already spent so much of my life looking more at like abstract people like Jordan Peterson. So yeah.
So like
So,
with you said with podcasts, I prefer ones where they have guests, so you can
Yeah.
have like the
Mhm.
interaction and
Exactly.
the resolving, the
Same.
resolutions between the two thoughts.
Yeah.
And that's why I'm doing this. Like I'm trying to, because I feel like after Jordan, after Harris, it's like, where's that new thing? And I'm
Hmm.
trying to gain insight just talking to people, hopefully with like different perspectives and stuff. Now I don't expect this to be like we're gonna figure out the next thing for the next 10 years,
Yeah.
but hopefully someone's gonna provide an insight that's gonna lead to a different direction. And
Hmm.
yeah,
it's quite funny because like you asked like who I've been listening to recently, and in the last, people have always kind of come to me and asked me what I thought about things, uh, and what wanted my opinion on things. There's always been sort of something in my life. I think because like my parents, when I was a kid, my mum and dad would say, "What do you think about this?" And it's like that's what they always do with kids, and it's like so. Like as a kid, it's like, oh, and you have a terrible thought, but it was always a thing in my life that oh, what do you think about this? And then sort of through high school and older, friends are like, what do you think about that? Because I always was the person people would ask. But in the last year, since I read a lot of Peterson's work and a lot of other things. Well, last year, people have come to me. There's been a lot of not say a lot of my time, but instead of reading about philosophy and crime and things like that, people have come to me and asked, "Hey, I got this problem. Things have gone to shit in my country. Been thinking about leaving. Um, what do you think about what do you think about my situation?" I had one friend, her husband. She came home one day to find that he was gone, and she was like, she came to me and she's like, "Oh my god, I've got all of these problems." And it was like, spend an evening. It's like, okay, just send me all your bills and I'll see if I can figure out how much you owe. And it turned out she owed $8 to the energy company. It's like, so okay, right, we've solved that problem. You don't owe thousands, you owe $8. So I find more of my time, instead of reading, I get a message and I end up talking to people and they sort of come to me with their problems, which I find really odd because I'm only 26. So, and it's like, I don't know why people asked me about like advice with women. It's like, I'm the worst person to ask. I'm not married. I have no girlfriend. And people will come to me and they'll like, my friends will say some things like, oh, I don't know, like my brothers, I don't understand my fiance. And it's like, well, I don't either, but you know, what, and I just ask him a few questions and he'd go, oh, that makes sense. And then, you know, hear from him in a few weeks' time again.
Because you're a good listener. I think that's what it is,
Yeah.
honestly. I think that
Yeah,
people
I
who are good
agree.
listeners and actually pay attention draw people to them. I mean, I think that's what it is. I mean, I don't know you very well, but I mean, just in the couple hours that we've talked, I mean, you're a listener. You listen to what people say. You pay a lot of attention to what they say. You ask appropriate questions. I don't know. I think that's the answer to your question.
No, thank you.
I would agree.
Yeah,
So-
just don't mess it up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I know now.
Don't give anyone like
Well, I
really
think that's
bad
why the age
answers.
doesn't matter. I think that's why the age doesn't matter. I think it's that when people have issues, they want to go to somebody that they actually think is going to listen to them. You know, and
I've had a few of my friends suggest that I become a psychologist. I'm like, well, certainly here it'd be very difficult with the other language, but yeah, it's thank you. I mean, it's
But yeah, like when I think like right now, like what I do is like if there's like a certain issue or topic on my mind, then I'll look up like different, like I don't know, whatever you want to call them, like experts or thinkers who like specialize in that area, and then like see what they have to say, and then like try to apply like different ways of their thinking to like whatever issue it is that I'm looking at. Like I think recently I was like looking at the whole concept of like morality and ethics and stuff again, and then I was looking, comparing at how like Peterson looks at it and what he would say about this, and like then what Harris would say about how to approach a situation, and then when I was like researching their ideas, then I came across other thinkers who also have something to say, and like how they would refute that idea, and then it just goes on and on.
Yeah, so like I was actually doing that like
Yeah.
maybe relatively recently, like definitely within like the last 3 years, like with that and like politics,
Mm-hmm.
because this whole YouTube thing, like, all right, you know what? For example, started looking into like the fallacy of each political system. So like communism, extreme capitalism, or
Oh yeah.
anarcho-capitalism. And the best thing I would search was like, let me look for debates, because if you hear someone talk for like 2 hours,
Mm-hmm.
you might get some value. But when you have debates, you get to hear
Mhm.
the best critiques on
Yeah.
both sides. That's how I started learning about all these other topics, and that's how I started familiarizing stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And I think for the ethical thing, because Sam Harris and Jordan had like those
Yeah,
lectures.
they don't agree. Yeah.
Yeah, but it's like I think it was
It's
like related, the
interesting
whole
because
truth and morality.
I see like validity, I guess, in both of their ideas, but it's just like they don't agree with each other.
So I'm really curious. So where do you stand now, like in terms of ethics? Like where do you think Jordan stands? Where do you think Sam stands? And then where do you stand?
So I'm still trying to figure out where I stand. But like where those two stand, like I was saying, I think for Jordan Peterson, it's more like he's looking at everything from an evolutionary point of view, taking in like all the religious like myths and whatever stories, and seeing how those, like why those myths exist, and like how we've evolved from that.
Yeah.
And so it's a lot more subjective, I find, like, but there is still a lot of value in like his ideas, and it does make a lot of sense. It's like the easiest way for us to understand how things are right now.
For
Like
sure.
if you look at like religions and all those myths, it's the easiest way to like that. It's like a more linear progression. Whereas with Sam Harris, it's his view on morality is like, for Sam Harris, it's almost like he like everything starts with a blank slate. It's like he was like, okay, if say there was no religion in the world at all, then how would we value things? And like, so he like kind of rejects history or not rejects it, but like he wants to like start from scratch. And so the way like what he sees true in all people or whatever is that we'll do whatever to promote well-being and minimize suffering, and that's what we use to figure out what's right and wrong, which is also true
Yeah,
in
yeah.
many ways. And it'll differ in different regions and cultures, but there is still like a basic commonality among that, like where we'll do anything to improve well-being, and the better we understand that through science, like what, like it's more science based. So it's like, oh, like, well, the science and data is showing that like this is how our body responds to like this action in the world, so that's why we should go ahead with this way of doing things. And I like that too, because it also makes things just more
Concrete.
yeah.
Yeah, that's what I like, because like Sam tries to take a logical route.
Yeah.
Yeah, Jordan's more like functional. He tries to look
Exactly.
he looks at everything like a
Both of them
tool.
could borrow. I feel like both of them could borrow each other's methods and apply them. Like, Sam could acknowledge how a lot of things, the way things are, have evolved through like, religion and stuff, and use that to like, in addition to like science and stuff. But yeah, I guess it's hard to like mend the two.
Yeah, like I'm trying to do that right now, like with morality. I haven't found like a good basis, but
Yeah.
what I notice, I think at least in the West, and this is what the right or the libertarians are trying to do. Our default, we have like our religious cultures and all that we have in the background, but I think what we're honing in on is consent. That's the basis of most of our morality in our legal system right now. It's not perfect, and that's why we have things like this is where we have like the gray areas and areas of contention. It's like freedom of speech or what businesses are allowed to do and all of that. At its core, to me,
Like, do you think we could do away with religion completely in the world we live in today?
no.
What do you
No, I
think,
don't.
Eric? No?
I don't.
I think it's kind of like, and what we have is a default. So, for example, like the religion, the traditions, the culture, we have things that we don't fully understand. We don't know everything. So, this is what we currently have. But then we have to use logic to perfect it and refine it.
Yeah,
So,
that's what I would agree with as well.
because if we just do logic, if we
Then
can't
we have nothing to fall back onto.
exactly, it's like for example, like the Joe Rogan thing with eating, what's safe and what's not. We have our default, but if we decided, okay, let's start from scratch, like practically, all right, I'm not gonna eat anything until I know this is safe. Like you'll die. Like it won't work.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, it's so true. Like you still have to be open to experimenting and like, listening. Like when it comes to food, like doing what's right.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, one thing with religion is I don't think anybody would really want to get rid of religion because like you've got what one thing that surprises me. It shows that it is a biological inclination is that women are 40% more likely to be religious than men, and that shows that, you know, if there's a genetic difference, you can see that one group, women, are more likely to be religious than men, and that doesn't mean they're any intellectually different. It just it's um, you know, it's what they prefer, and the if you yeah, I mean, getting rid of religion is generally followed by a lot of bloodshed from a particular group of people who follow an ideology, which isn't really much different.
And I feel like if you get rid of ideologies, it's just inevitably going to bring out some new ideology that's going to replace the old ideology. Like, I think it's really difficult to just eradicate ideologies.
Oh no,
You need things to believe on in order to survive.
it's sort of ideology is sort of a level one of the brain.
Yeah.
It's once we're past survival, then how to act. Well, people like the first thing they do is adopt an ideology, and then maybe they go beyond that. And then,
There'll always be ideologies.
Yeah.
So I feel like just having an open mind is good. Like, you know, sure, like you might stick to one, but like be open to refining whatever ideology you've adopted. But like,
and you've
I
got
don't
to
think you
accept
can ever
that
get rid of it.
Yeah.
people are different and have different modus operandi. That would, yeah, it's but yeah, religion is here, and the other thing with religions is the ones that are around today have been around today for have been around since a long time ago, and if a group of people still believe a set of ideas and a set of practices, those ideas clearly have kept them safe, and it's safe enough that they can reproduce enough and prosperous enough that their offspring are healthy enough to grow to adulthood. And it's an idea that's well enough defined that it can be taken forward to the next generation. So, you know,
It's
there's
Darwinian.
yeah, in a way, meme theory. So you've got cults that want to depopulate the earth. Well, they don't last more than a few years because they kill themselves and the idea doesn't propagate on. And whereas, you know, like Christianity or Hinduism is a good example, a very old example. Buddhism, very old example. There's a set of practices, there's a set of beliefs, and out of that, they have a stable enough society that you can raise children to have the same beliefs, and they've got enough food, they've got enough water, they're healthy enough that they can go on and do and repeat that set of. They can go on and repeat that for the next generation. So they've been there for a long time, and that's the thing about religions. They sort of have brought an element of stability because they've been there for a long time.
And yeah, like I think one of the greatest things that religion has done is just foster this like sense of community, and that's why most people still hold on to religion, because of that community. And if you were to get rid of religion completely, then how do we replace that community? Like, what is going to take that place for that? Yeah.
I think that's something that's happening now. So like, let's say like New Age or the hippie movement, you know, they might be, let's say, more exaggerated in a certain way, but they are trying to develop a community. And that, just generalizing, that's what like cities lack. Typical atheist environments, they don't have that community.
No. And
also clubs and things like that. I'm not talking about nightclubs. I'm talking about like
Okay.
Like
golf clubs
and yeah. But it's just like there's no default that forces people to get along with each other, whereas religion it provides that sense of community, but also like kind of forces people to tolerate each other and get along, because and that's kind of what's established the order that we have today. if we were to just get rid of that, then like there wouldn't be too much, I think, that would force people to get along. I mean, I don't know.
No, that's interesting. And it's funny. It's like at the extreme. It's like religion forces people to be part of the community. Like what? You have to convert, man. You have to be here with us.
I don't think it's possible to completely get rid of it because along the lines of what Jordan Peterson was saying, it appears in our life. I mean, people behave as though they're religious in so many other ways. Remember he said just going to a concert, watching television. All of these are forms of religious behavior. And I think that what would happen is if you were to eliminate a religion, it would crop up in another way, shape. It would happen again.
Yeah, so we have like the new age.
That's what we were saying, like, you know, some new ideology would replace the old ideology.
Exactly. Personally, like I had a discussion with somebody once that said, like, okay, so if we did like even politically, like let's say we just got rid of all Republicans, conservatives, everything. We just everybody in the country was all Democrat.
Yeah.
What would happen is you would get
conservative
Democrats and liberal Democrats, and you would get it would just eventually end up the same place. Is what I think is kind of what I think would happen.
But again, in there are areas in the world that have tried to get rid of religion, like China. And then you look at how people live around and how people treat the Chinese Communist Party. The CCP is the religion now. You go, you wave flags, you wave a red flag, and you stand in line, and they've got their military parade that goes through all the time. There's a ceremony every day, and there's all the the national holidays. It's just that the CCP is taking the place of the religion, and like right now, the Uyghurs in northwestern China, they're being put in re-education camps, and it's like you try to get rid of one religion, well, they're just replacing it with another.
Exactly.
So, like, what do you guys think of this? What if it's like, to like get a bit more abstract? What if there's like, let's say, a right way of being, which involves, hey, it's like evolutionary. If you want to work, you need to work as a community, and you need to like want to promote life, etc. And then let's say a lot of these factors that are in the right way of being overlap with religion or religious activities. So we say, hey, you're being religious. I mean, you are. So like kind of like with communism or stuff like waving the red flag, or we describe this right way of being sometimes. We generalize it and we say, hey, you're being kind of religious here. Like kind of like the concert thing, like when people get together and like, you have that like moment where everyone feels connected. It's like a religious experience.
Yeah.
Like the one thing that sort of stuck out there was like you were saying about a right way of being, and so something like submarines, for example. There's not one rank of submariner. Everybody has their role. So maybe there's many right ways of being, and we all have to fit into some sort of one of them, but that's our role, and other people have to fill other roles. Like, a right way of being. Well, if a husband and wife did all the exact same things, they would, I know my house would be a complete mess. And so, maybe there's many right ways of being. We need to sort of conform to one of them, our personality guides us toward one of them. But we really do need the other people there to keep the electricity on, or I'm a man, I can't have a baby, So for the sake of the species, there have to be women, and maybe there's many right ways of being. We've just got to conform to one of them and let other people conform to the others, so that we can all survive. Because on our own, in the wild, humans on their own just don't survive. We survive in tribes.
Now,
Yeah.
what about the idea that Jordan Peterson has presented, where he basically says that he thinks that the idea of God is that perfect being representation, like you were saying, like the one way of being. Okay, so if people saw that, then life is basically would be about reaching that point. I mean, it's basically it's unachievable. Basically, I mean, it's perfection. But
Yeah.
the whole point of it is to reach to strive towards that. So you're not a
Right.
horrible person if you mess up. You
Yeah.
as long as your intentions in moving towards that goal are true, then I don't know. I'm not. That's not a debate. I just wondered how your way of thinking kind of made me think about when Jordan Peterson said that, and I didn't know if you remember when he said that
Yeah.
or your belief.
No, I remember that.
Yeah, I was kind of referring to that because, paraphrasing, he said, when you start talking about things like this, it's almost like there's no other way to talk about it except religiously, because that's the deepest thing. That's one of the deepest things we talk
Yeah.
about.
Yeah.
Mhm.
It's like,
And it's
yeah, I'm not going to talk about evolutionary biology and say it's a trend, like a Twitter trend, like it's a fad, because it's much deeper and longer than a fad.
yeah.
Right,
And
right.
it's true, like we will always talk about like these ideas or whatever, like religiously, because it's not like it's grounded in science or anything.
Right.
There's no other way to like define it or talk about it.
Yeah.
Right.
Maybe monotheistic religions that have well, the big religions in the West are monotheistic. So maybe we think of our way of being, but the ancient Greeks thought of many ways of being because they had many gods. Uh, maybe that's something. Maybe we're missing something these days from being monotheistic instead of well, Hindus have many gods.
Yeah, like polytheistic.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think the point is just that, like, regardless if it's one god or like 10 gods, like, the fact is that there is just something else there that, like, we cannot define. And so we're always going to somehow refer to it, like, religiously, even if we call ourselves atheists or whatever.
Yeah, that's why like people who do R&D or like the great scientists like Einstein, if you start talking about science like quantum,
Mhm.
at a certain point you're going to sound religious.
It's
Right.
weird. Quantum mechanics is weird.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's-
Yeah.
well, again, it might just be weird because it's new to us and we just don't have the language around it.
Exactly.
So picture it in our head, and so we just don't have the language, and the only language we've got is language of religion. Like,
That's the point.
yeah, I mean, the words have been developed for so long, and
I mean, thousands of years ago, the moon was considered spiritual. It was proof positive of, something spiritual. They didn't know what that was. We discover it as we go.
Yeah.
Someday there'll be a scientific explanation for, what we think of as religious. Yeah.
I always got on, even though I've always been an atheist, I've always gotten on much better with the idea of like Thor and Loki and like the Greeks with the many gods.
I mean, he has a hammer. Shoots lightning.
Yeah, I always sort of got on with the idea that you kind of had a god for you and somebody else had a kind of a different god. Like, because my brother and I are totally different. It's amazing how different we are. And when people spoke about like in school in England, we had to God was that one thing. Whereas I always I heard about like I always thought that the many gods sort of fit better, fit society a little bit better.
So I think like it's like you're looking at two different answers and you're trying to use the same question. So like it works at different levels. The many gods, it could be like each person has their own path. Like you said, like you can't give birth to a baby. Each person has their own individuality. There's some ideal that's unique to everyone, but the monotheistic represent just the hierarchy itself, like the fact that everyone does have an ideal, that the ideal exists.
Hmm.
Yeah. In a way, if we all got our acts together and all managed to get to the next level, closer to God, there would be a lot more homogeny between people.
And yes,
Um,
definitely similarities.
yeah, and in some ways that would reduce the crime rate, because one of the big drivers of crime is socioeconomic. Poor people living right next to very wealthy people, it's going to create difference in it. So, but one of the biggest driver of our economy is the fact that there's a distribution of wealth that isn't fair. We've got a goal to go toward, a better job, make money, get clients, make money.
Yeah.
It's yeah, I mean, in
I
a
don't
way,
think we can like. I don't think it'll ever be like everyone will have like similar income level. Like maybe we'll like as we progress more into the future, we'll be able to pull people above the poverty line. Like more people will have access to shelter, food, water, like their basic necessities. But I don't think it'll ever be like completely equal. Like there'll
Yeah.
always be people here than
What was the Pareto
others.
distribution that Jordan Peterson always talks about? That there's always going to be a
Yeah.
certain level, like you said. There's not. I mean, having everybody have everything is just. Oh, no, what
No,
he said.
I don't even think that's sustainable, like for the
Yeah.
world.
Because it's
Well,
not just that, but it's people have different desires. Some people
And yeah,
just
that
don't
too.
want to be equal.
And we don't even have the resources for everyone to like live like the wealthiest person.
Well,
well, in a way, I've had this discussion with my dad a lot, because he considers billionaires to be thieves, and it's like, well, no, you've got someone like Elon Musk. So he's made a car, right? A really good car, a Tesla. So you want to buy that car? Well, you borrow money from a bank. Now, technically speaking, that money never actually existed before the bank lent it to you, because they don't have a reserve and then you get a loan and you pay it back anymore. It just doesn't work like that anymore. They have a reserve and they can lend an unlimited amount of money compared to that small reserve. So they give you a loan for 100,000 that never existed before. You get a car, and Tesla, the company, pay all its employees. So in a way, when you've invented something, if you're a creative person, you've invented a car company like Elon Musk has, you've created that money out of thin air to pay for it, and then people pay with their job the bank back, so that the reserve gets a little bit bigger. But being creative, it creates new wealth. It's not taking it from anybody at the bottom. It's created that wealth. So in a way, being more billionaires is a way of billionaires who make things for customers. As long as people have got access to good banking, then they have a decent shot of getting a good standard of living and making more billionaires more money.
Yeah.
In a way.
Yeah, I don't think like billionaires should be looked at as evil people or something.
Some are.
Are there evil billionaires? I'm sure there are.
Yeah, there are. Yeah.
But there are some probably very, very generous,
Yeah,
billionaires.
like Bill Gates himself, like he donates more than half his money. Like the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, like they're like probably the most philanthropic.
Right.
yeah, I know that word.
little billionaires in the world today. And yeah, not every billionaire does that, but that doesn't also make them terrible, but it's also not, it's also our jobs to like make sure they're not like, you know, setting standards for, so they don't abuse everything. Like, you know,
This is
like,
something I was trying to say before too about like how much power people really have and don't
Exactly.
realize it. But a lot of these companies, if you don't like the way a business is run, this is where
Yeah.
Occupy Wall Street was right. If you don't like the way a business is run, if enough people just say, we're done with you,
exactly.
they're going to have to
Like,
change. They're going to be out of
with
business.
Jeff Bezos, for example, like, you know, people didn't like how much he destroyed the environment and like the working conditions. And, you know, after enough pressure, like now he's putting money towards the environment and like improving things. So we do have a say.
Right.
And like, if we don't, it's our responsibility to like give our inputs, because if we don't, then yeah, they're just going to go do whatever the heck they want. And sometimes, and like, I feel like most people, I mean, not everyone would, but like a lot of people, if there is no limits to the profits they can achieve, then like what's stopping them? Like,
Right.
I
It
feel
doesn't take many customers leaving a company for it to drop below the profit line.
Yep.
So, like, for example, I know airlines, half the revenue of an airline flight is from the business class, and that's generally not even a quarter of the passengers. And you know, at first class, generally people pay for their own ticket. So you know, you've got to give a really good service to charge that much more. But business class, the person flying isn't the person paying, so you can charge what you want. And so yeah, and this is the big shift in the airline industry. Zoom like this is doing huge damage because that 25% of seats, they're not sold. They're doing Zoom calls now. So airlines have got to change what they fly, change the configuration of what they fly, and change where they fly, because it's all holiday destination, which is great. Might actually be worth becoming an airline pilot again. But because in the 60s, that's what it was. It was regional airports to holiday destinations. And then it slowly turned toward the hub and spoke pattern of flying. You know, you fly small aircraft to Chicago, then they fly a big aircraft to London, and that's terrible for pilots. But now it's like, yeah, actually, you're flying smaller airplanes like Embraers. So it doesn't take much. It doesn't take many people. Only a few seats are the profit seats on an aircraft. There's an extreme example, but it doesn't take many people walking away from a company for it to have to change.
Yeah, and this is all like it's all related to like creative destruction. It's like anytime there's innovation, just people who are gonna not really make it. So it's always it's that balance between progress and stability. So it's just, and I think it's a cycle where becoming more and more efficient at it, but it's just it's inevitable. As long as you're making progress, then cool.
I just got efficiented out of having a job. So, you know, the company had to get more efficient. Well, I was the first to go. So,
I do have to go. I have some other work to do, but it was a lot of fun.
yeah, awesome.
No, that's cool. Yeah, we hit the
Are you guys?
2 hours.
I'm going to have to get going pretty soon too. I don't really have a time limit, but
Yeah, I've got to go and eat
My
at some
attention.
point. It's 8:30 here. So.
Yeah, that's why it's time different now for you.
Yeah, thanks. That
Wait,
helps.
what time is it for the rest of you guys? For me, it's 2:37.
oh, well, yeah. So you're the same as me.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Like Guster was saying, George is in Paris.
Yeah, Paris time is 8:30, and
Yeah, the three of us like are all in the same time zone.
yeah. Well, anyway, it was great talking to everybody, but
I guess
I've got to go and
our-
eat at some point.
No worries. Yeah, and
Yeah.
you know, I'll keep everyone updated for like next time.
Awesome. Always good fun.
Yeah, this was
Yeah,
fun.
absolutely. All right. Good talking to you guys.
Yeah.
Bye.
Thanks, guys. All right. Bye-bye.
Bye, guys.